GALP.
Missed the last train. Need to book an Uber. Bloody hell, no Wi-Fi. Oh, I guess I'm staying up all night. Oh, I'm too old for this. Out drinking late in Japan? Stay safe and be prepared. Get Wi-Fi coverage across Japan and Google where to go. Rent a mini Wi-Fi router or eSIM with Ninja Wi-Fi. Trusted by 21 million customers worldwide, Ninja Wi-Fi provides great service for an affordable price. Visit ninjawifi.com and use the code GAL for 20% off.
この番組はグランドスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
I'm not gonna lie, I've never really heard about this game series before a few months ago, and I'm very happy and excited to talk about Death End Request Code Z with you guys today. Let's get into our disclaimer. For you new folks, GALP is a weekly gaming discussion podcast under the GALP Podcast Network. We talk about all sorts of games from big AAA titles all the way to some indie games, but our forte is Japanese games, so expect that a lot. We can be found anywhere where you listen to podcasts, including Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and now on YouTube. Whilst you're there, be sure to give us a 5-star review and a thumbs up as well. Remember, if you want to join in on the fun, then follow us on all of our socials. That's Blue Sky, TikTok, Insta, and X, all at GAL Podcasts. Death End Request is a horror JRPG series in which a group of young people traverse through a world tainted by bugs, death threatening them at every turn as they confront mysteries and danger. It's packed with despair-inducing death ends written by Makoto Keduin, acclaimed writer of Corpse Party. The first installment of Death End Request series launched on the PlayStation 4 in 2018 in Japan, 2019 in North America and Europe, and its sequel, Death End Request 2, released on the PlayStation 4 during 2020, and that's all regions. These titles were turn-based RPGs, but in this spin-off, Compile Heart has decided to jump on the roguelike RPG trend. Personally, I don't think that's a bad thing, and I've really been getting into roguelikes, so I was pretty excited to review this one from the get-go. I didn't know this series at all, and I was very intrigued. And although this is a Compile Heart game, it feels very NIS, from its character designs to its music, and I don't know why, but I kind of feel like I'm playing a game like Criminal Girls or Poison Control, and that's probably down to the character design, the way that the dungeons operate, and the design of the monsters, etc. It's a bit uncanny, and it's hard to explain, but if you've played those games before, you might understand what I'm feeling. Anyway, the music, I've already mentioned it, it's absolutely fantastic. And so is the artwork and the general UI. And not to forget that this game is made in Unreal Engine and utilizes Live 2D for its visual novel style elements, which are fully voiced, I might add. I'll go out on a limb and say that all games with visual novel elements should be using Live 2D. Yes, it takes a lot of work and a lot of money to rig what is effectively a in-game VTuber model, but it adds to the overall immersion and just makes the game more visually appealing. For someone who hasn't played this series before, the concept is incredibly odd. Death happens a lot in this game, even from the very beginning. Alice, who is somewhat of our guide in this game, and you kind of meet her every time you die, she says this: "Death is something to be avoided, but a splendid demise might please you. It'll please someone." And that's quite creepy. I gotta say that put a chill down my spine the first time I heard that. Every time you die, especially when landing on a trap in-game, narrates every detail of your death. The game actually encourages you to collect these death ends like trophies. and you can actually view them, as well as unlock conditions for them in the gallery. And more importantly, death ends act as your skill tree. With every death end you discover, you gain a skill point that's used to upgrade Sayaka's abilities and stats. It's a very weird yet wonderful game mechanic. It reminds me a lot of isekai anime, especially the anime Re:Zero, and it kind of makes the roguelike gameplay a bit more meaningful. Why do I say that? Because with roguelikes, you die a lot. That's part of it. You know, I was playing Muso Abyss, and the amount of times that I died in that game, but then every time you play it again and you fight that same boss, you gain a little bit more. And the game is very aware of this. I'm very new to roguelikes, but having playing others recently, I don't feel the sense of accomplish when I'm defeated and have to do the whole dungeon again from the start. Oddly enough, due to the death ends and then being linked in with the skill tree and progression, I'm often finding myself purposefully entering the dungeons and getting attacked by mobs. So I can grind in this game for hours and hours and hours and hours on end, and it's very, very odd, but quite refreshing at the same time. I'm almost curious what death end I'll unlock next. They differ depending on how you died in game, whether it's by the same mob multiple times, or even traps, or by self-harm. There are some death ends that you can unlock only when you're at 0 sanity level. Within the dungeon, Sayaka has a sanity level, so I've just mentioned that. It gradually decreases over time with each passing turn, and the longer you stay within the dungeon. It falls, and as it falls, the screen will begin to change and your field of vision will narrow and become distorted. The number of icons displayed on the minimap then decreases. Sayaka may even become confused and start to attack herself, which could lead to a death end, which I presume is suicide. I actually haven't unlocked this death end yet because I don't really feel that I want to, but it could happen in a dungeon, especially if you're fighting other mobs and your sanity level goes 0 and you start attacking yourself. That's unavoidable. So you kind of want to keep certain things on you, like certain items that could raise up your sanity level or can heal you, etc. Although combat isn't the game's core game mechanic, the combat and controls is really not something to write home about. It feels quite clunky to control, and to be fair with you, I say that, I think it's by design. The game explicitly mentions you to use a D-pad to control the character through dungeons. And even when you use the analog stick, it still feels like using a D-pad. The character will move in specific directions. Think of it like having an arcade stick, like a Sanwa stick, and it doesn't have an octagonal gate, but it has a square gate that only allows you to move in 4 specific directions. Oddly enough, speaking of an arcade stick, I did decide to play this game with an arcade stick, and I hooked up my arcade stick and it was my preferred way of playing. It leads me on to another point. The controls are simple enough where you can use adapted controllers if needed. I don't think that was intentional, but it's a very positive thing nevertheless. So good one on Compile Heart for that. I wanted to mention the world map for a moment. It's weird, and it made me feel oddly nostalgic for visual novels back in the PSP era. These sort of overworld maps were made from extruded blocks and sort of highlighted areas in red and points of interest, etc. And it was very common back in the 2010s, most likely due to hardware limitations on the PSP. I'm thinking of visual novels like the Toradora visual novel, or other games kind of made by Bandai around that time, so like Orimo and stuff like that. The game is pretty small, which makes sense that they opted for this type of map to sort of save on game space, etc. You can use the map to fast travel to main story beats or sub-storylines and item shops. Speaking of sub-stories, I'm a big fan of the side stories you have with Sayaka or Shina, and I think for a Japanese audience it can be a bit monotonous because it's pretty much these characters visiting a konbini or a family restaurant. But it does give an insight into Japanese culture and daily life. There was one side story where they walk into a family restaurant, and if you've ever been to Japan, it's clearly a saizeria. You can kind of tell because of the decor and the soda fountains in the back. And the game even briefly touches upon social topics and themes like social anxiety or hikikomori. Hikikomori being a term to describe people who are social hermits in Japan, and that kind of bleeds into the dungeon portions. With regards to the art style, the game feels as though it's leaning towards ecchi at times. Certainly not as much as games like Criminal Girls or the Moiro H series, but it seems odd because some of the death ends look a little bit sexualized. Other than that, the art style is fantastic. The CGs and the character designs all look fantastic, and even side characters are incredibly well designed. Another thing I want to mention is that the game is fully voice acted, which you don't really see that in a lot of games nowadays, and albeit I don't believe there is English voices, Japanese voices are quite exceptional as well. So I'd say give it a try. I didn't actually get to finish this game, I'll be honest with you guys. I was just kind of stuck with grinding and unlocking these death ends because it is kind of the more interesting part of the game. The story is quite interesting, but I've kind of gotten to a point where boss fights are incredibly difficult at first because there's certain things that you would need to unlock and certain things that you kind of need to grind for. So you're almost in sort of infinite loop where the boss is quite hard and you get sent to the dungeon all over again. And then you're like, well, I don't want to spend that much time in the dungeon. I want to get past this boss and move on to the next sector of the dungeon. So what do you then do? You find ways of basically dying in game, new ways. You go back to that menu and you look at, oh, what new death ends have I not unlocked yet? So find more death ends to unlock, expand that skill tree, then go and fight the boss. Now, like I said, I spent hours and hours and hours and hours playing this game, and especially grinding is quite fun because you're gaining something out of it, right? Yes, you're gaining the ability to become better, but also you get to experience these death ends. Now, it might sound a little bit morbid, but they are quite enjoyable to unlock these new things. They're almost like trophies, like I mentioned. Now, if you are a fan of horror games, I'm not a fan of horror games. I wasn't really a fan of Corpse Party, but I think now I'm sort of getting into more horror anime and stuff. So this was kind of a light, quote unquote, horror games. It is quite censored. So if you want to get into the horror game genre and if you want to get into the horror anime genre, this is a perfect entry point because a lot of it is censored and it's not as bad. So yeah, very intriguing story, very intriguing game mechanics, and I'd love to play more. So yeah, you can get this game on the PlayStation 4 and I believe on the PC and on the PS5. I did play it on the PS5, and thanks for Compile Heart, Idea Factory, and Reef Entertainment for sending me a code of this game for review. And I really do think you guys should give it a go, especially if you're a fan of horror games, especially if you're a fan of visual novels, especially if you're a fan of Japanese games. Go and support this game because it is quite nice and quirky. A little bit morbid, but I think quickly you'll get over that because of its intriguing game mechanic. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we will see you next week for another episode of GALP.